My friends, it is a curious thing, is it not? How the trials of life seem so unrelenting, as though we are being prepared for something grand, yet kept in the dark as to what it is. If you have ever felt this way, then take heart, for you are not alone. The great author is at work in your life, chiseling and refining, though you may not yet see the masterpiece he intends to create. Imagine, if you will, a man who sets out to build a grand house. At first the work is understandable, fixing the foundation, repairing broken walls, but then strange things begin to happen. The walls are knocked down, new rooms are added, great towers rise where there was once a simple cottage. You had thought he was making you into something small and comfortable, but he is turning you into a palace. Why? Because he intends to dwell there himself. You see, blessings are not merely handed to us like trinkets from a merchant's cart. No, they are prepared in the same way an artist prepares his canvas. The rough strokes, the deep shadows, they all serve a purpose. The very trials that cause you to groan in frustration may be the marks of his craftsmanship. Consider the great heroes of faith. None were given their calling without first being tested. They waited, they endured, they were stretched beyond their comfort, and yet, when the blessing came, it was greater than anything they could have conceived. So too it is with you. If you find yourself waiting, if you feel the weight of an unseen hand pressing upon you, then rejoice, for he is at work, and his work is never in vain. So do not lose heart. Do not mistake the hammer and chisel for cruelty when they are in fact the tools of love. Trust the process, trust the author, and in time you will see. He was never absent. He was preparing you for something far greater than you ever imagined. Adversity is often viewed as an unwelcome guest, something to be avoided, prayed away, or escaped at the first opportunity. And yet, when we look at life through the lens of faith, we begin to see that challenges are not without purpose. In fact, they are one of the most profound tools in God's hands to shape us into what we are meant to be. Imagine a lump of clay in the hands of a potter. In its natural state, it is formless, rough, and unremarkable. Left untouched, it remains nothing more than a useless clump, but in the hands of the craftsman, it is pressed, kneaded, and sometimes even crushed before it begins to take shape. The pressure applied to it is not meant for its destruction, but for its transformation. So too, adversity is not a sign of God's neglect, but rather his careful molding of our souls. If we were given everything we desired the moment we wished for it, we would become weak, ungrateful, and unprepared for the responsibilities that come with great blessings. Think of the child who is handed every toy and treat without ever knowing effort or struggle. Such a child does not grow into a strong, virtuous person, but instead remains stunted, unable to appreciate value, discipline, or endurance. The same principle applies to us in spiritual matters. God does not waste our struggles. Each trial is an instrument sharpening our faith, deepening our character, and preparing us for a greater purpose. History and Scripture alike are filled with examples of those who faced immense hardship, only to be elevated to great purpose afterward. For years it must have seemed as though all hope was lost. But in time it became clear that every hardship was a stepping stone leading him to his role as the Savior of his people. David, anointed to be king, spent years running for his life before he could sit on the throne. Even Christ himself, though perfect, endured suffering before glory. If we look at our own lives, we may see times of hardship that, in retrospect, led to our greatest growth. The pain we once resented may now be recognized as the catalyst that shaped our wisdom, resilience, or even our capacity to help others. This is the hidden purpose of adversity. It refines, strengthens, and prepares us in ways we cannot see while we are in the midst of it. Therefore, when difficulty comes, instead of despairing, we should ask, what is God teaching me? What is He preparing me for? What is He preparing me for? Though the road may be painful, it is not without purpose. We are being shaped into something far greater than we can imagine. And one day we will look back and realize that the struggles we endured were not signs of abandonment, but of divine preparation for blessings beyond our comprehension. God is shaping you for something beyond your understanding. If you have ever watched a sculptor at work, you will notice something peculiar. At first, the raw material, a block of marble or wood, bears no resemblance to anything beautiful. It is rough, unformed, and ordinary. But as the sculptor begins his work, something remarkable happens. With every strike of the chisel, the excess is removed. With every careful carving, something new emerges. The process is slow, sometimes painful to witness, yet in the hands of the master, the final masterpiece is inevitable. In the same way, God, the divine sculptor, is shaping you. You may not always understand what He is doing. The circumstances of your life may seem confusing, even painful. But every challenge, every loss, every unanswered prayer is not without purpose. You are being molded into something far greater than you can currently perceive. Consider this. If you were that block of marble, you might resist the chisel. You might question why pieces of you are being taken away, why you must endure hardship, why the shaping process feels so relentless. But the marble does not see what the sculptor sees. The sculptor already envisions the final work. He knows that in order to bring out the beauty within, some things must be removed. Rough edges must be smoothed, weaknesses must be carved away. This is how God works in our lives. When He prepares us for a blessing, He first prepares us for the weight of it. A great calling, a great responsibility, a great gift. None of these things can be entrusted to one who has not been prepared. The very struggles you endure may be the necessary shaping required to make you strong enough to carry the blessing God has in store. Think of the heroes of faith. Moses was once a prince, but before he could lead his people, he was sent to the wilderness. There, in solitude and obscurity, God shaped him into a leader. Esther was an orphan before she became a queen. Joseph was betrayed before he became a ruler. Even Jesus himself spent time in the wilderness before stepping into his public ministry. God does not rush the process, nor does He make mistakes in His preparation. It is easy to feel discouraged when you cannot see the full picture. It is easy to ask, why must I endure this? Why is this happening to me? But the greater question is, what is God forming in me? If you are in a season of shaping, trust that He is doing something extraordinary. He is not breaking you, He is building you. He is not withholding blessings, He is making you ready to receive them. So, do not resist the sculptor's hands. Trust in His work. One day you will stand in awe of what He has made of you, and in that moment you will understand it was all worth it. There is a truth often overlooked in our pursuit of blessings. The greater the gift, the greater the preparation required to receive it. A small burden requires little strength, but a great one demands endurance, wisdom, and resilience. In the same way, when God is preparing you for something significant, He first prepares you to carry the weight of it. He carries you to carry the weight of it. We often desire blessings without considering the responsibility they bring. A promotion at work requires greater leadership. A relationship requires commitment and selflessness. A financial increase requires discipline and stewardship. Every blessing has a weight, and if we are not prepared, what was meant to be a gift can become a burden we are unable to bear. Think of a young child who dreams of riding a mighty war horse. He sees the beauty and power of the creature, but he does not yet possess the strength to control it. Were he to mount the horse too soon, he would be thrown off, unable to handle what he so desperately longed for. So, the child must first be trained. He must develop balance, patience, and skill. Only then, after enduring the process, will he be able to receive the very thing he desired. God operates in the same way. He will not give you something that you are not yet ready to carry. If he is delaying a blessing, it is not because he is withholding good from you. It is because he is preparing you to handle it well. Just as a blacksmith refines metal in the fire to strengthen it, so too does God refine his people. The trials, the waiting, the challenges, they are all part of the preparation. Consider David, anointed as king while still a shepherd boy. He did not step onto the throne immediately. Instead, he spent years in the wilderness, facing battles, betrayals, and hardship. But through this process, he was being shaped into the king he was called to be. Had he received the crown too soon, he would not have been ready to lead with wisdom and strength. The weight of the blessing required preparation. Or take Joseph, who dreamed of greatness but was first thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and unjustly imprisoned. It would have been easy for him to despair, to believe that God had forgotten him. But in reality, each trial was a step toward his destiny. When the time came for him to rise to power, he was not only ready, he was capable of using his position for good. The same principle applies to us. If we desire great blessings, we must also be willing to endure great preparation. This preparation may come in the form of waiting, hardship, or lessons we do not fully understand. But one day, when the blessing finally arrives, we will realize that the weight we once feared is now something we carry with strength. So take heart. If you feel stretched, tested, or delayed, know that God is not denying you. He is strengthening you. For when the blessing comes, you will not be crushed under its weight. You will stand firm, prepared to receive it in its fullness. Faith is easy when the path is clear, when prayers are answered swiftly, and when life moves according to our expectations. But faith that is never tested is not faith at all, it is mere optimism. True faith, the kind that sustains and transforms, is forged in the fires of waiting and struggle. Waiting is one of the most difficult disciplines in the life of a believer. We live in a world of instant gratification, where delays feel like denials and hardship feels like abandonment. But God's timeline is not our own. When we are asked to wait, it is not because he has forgotten us, but because he is working something deeper within us. Look at the stories of those who walked before us. Abraham was promised descendants as numerous as the stars, yet he and Sarah endured decades of barrenness before Isaac was born. What must it have been like for him to look up at the sky, night after night, and wonder when God's promise would be fulfilled? Yet it was in this long wait that his faith was strengthened. Consider the Israelites, who were led out of Egypt with the promise of a land flowing with milk and honey, and yet, before they could enter it, they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. Why? Because they had to learn trust. They had to learn dependence. If they had entered the promised land too soon, they would have carried their slavery mentality with them. The struggle was part of their transformation. And then there is Job, a man who lost everything, his family, his wealth, his health. He could not see the reason for his suffering, nor did he receive an immediate answer from God. But he endured, clinging to his faith even when everything else had been stripped away, and in the end he was restored beyond what he had before. His faith was refined not because he was spared hardship, but because he endured it. Faith is not proven in comfort, it is proven in the storm. It is one thing to trust God when everything is going well. It is another to trust Him when the heavens are silent, when prayers seem unanswered, and when doors remain closed. This is the test of true faith. Will you still believe when you cannot see? Will you still trust when the promise seems distant? Endurance is the fruit of a faith that refuses to give up. It is what carries us through the waiting, through the suffering, and through the uncertainty. God is not just interested in blessing us. He is interested in forming us. And He often uses struggle to build in us the strength we will need for the very blessings we seek. So if you find yourself in a season of waiting, do not despair. If your faith is being tested, do not give up. The waiting is not wasted, and the struggle is not meaningless. God is shaping something within you, something that will allow you to carry the blessing when it finally comes. Hold fast, keep believing. True faith is not found in the absence of trials. It is found in enduring them with trust, knowing that God is faithful even when the road is long. God works in ways unseen before His plan is revealed. There is a quiet, unseen work that God does in our lives, one that often goes unnoticed until it is complete. We long for visible signs, immediate breakthroughs and clear direction, but God often moves in ways hidden from our understanding. His grace is at work beneath the surface, preparing, aligning, and shaping events in ways we cannot yet perceive. Consider the way seeds grow. When planted in the soil, they disappear from sight. Days, weeks, or even months may pass without any visible change. Yet beneath the ground, something is happening. The seed is breaking, roots are forming, and life is taking shape. If one were to judge only by what is visible, they might assume nothing is happening at all. But in due time the plant emerges, revealing what had been growing all along. God's work in our lives often follows the same pattern. There are seasons where we feel as though nothing is changing, as if our prayers go unheard. We assume that silence means absence, but in truth God is moving in ways we cannot yet see. He is aligning people, circumstances, and opportunities in perfect order. He is refining our hearts, teaching us patience, and removing what might hinder His blessing. Think of Joseph. After being sold into slavery by his own brothers, he found himself in prison for a crime he did not commit. From the outside it seemed as though his life was derailed. But behind the scenes, God was orchestrating events that would elevate him to a position of power in Egypt. Every trial, every moment of waiting was leading to the fulfillment of a greater plan. What seemed like delay was actually divine preparation. Or consider Esther, an ordinary Jewish girl who was unknowingly positioned to become queen. She had no idea that the very place she was being placed in would later be used to save an entire nation. Had she questioned the process, she might have doubted God's hand in her life. Yet, when the time came, she realized that everything had been leading to that moment. This is the nature of God's hidden work. He does not always reveal His plans immediately, but He is always at work. Just because we cannot see progress does not mean it is not happening. His grace moves quietly, preparing us for the appointed time when everything will come together. So, if you find yourself in a season where God seems silent, trust that He is still active. Just as a seed must remain buried before it can grow, so too must we endure times of uncertainty before His plans are revealed. One day, when you look back, you will see how every delay, every challenge, and every unanswered prayer was part of something far greater than you imagined. Until then, hold on. His grace is working even in the unseen. We often ask God for blessings, breakthroughs, and opportunities, but we rarely consider the kind of person we need to become in order to receive them. The truth is, before we step into the greatness God has planned, we must first be transformed. No one receives a great calling without being shaped to handle it. The blessing requires preparation, and that preparation is a process of change. If you were handed your greatest desire today, whether it be success, influence, or a deep and meaningful relationship, would you be ready for it? Would you have the wisdom, the strength, and the character to sustain it? Many times, God delays what we desire, not to punish us, but to prepare us. He knows that if we receive something too soon, it could crush us rather than bless us. Consider the story of the Israelites. God had promised them a land flowing with milk and honey, yet before they could enter it, they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. Why? Because while they had been freed from Egypt, Egypt had not yet been freed from them. They still carried a mindset of fear, doubt, and rebellion. Had they entered the promised land too soon, they would have wasted it. Their time in the wilderness was not a punishment, it was a process of transformation. They had to learn trust, obedience, and reliance on God before they could step into what was promised. Look at David, anointed as king while still a shepherd boy. He did not take the throne immediately. Instead, he spent years on the run, facing trials, betrayals, and battles. Why? Because he needed to be shaped into the kind of king who would lead with wisdom and humility. Had he been crowned too soon, he would not have been ready. The hardships he faced were not obstacles to his destiny. They were the very things that prepared him for it. Even in the life of Jesus, we see this pattern. Though he was the Son of God, he did not begin his ministry immediately. He spent years in quiet preparation, growing in wisdom and stature. Before stepping into his calling, he was led into the wilderness to be tested. His transformation preceded his triumph. This same principle applies to us. We must be changed before we can fully receive what is meant for us. If we desire a strong marriage, we must first become whole and selfless individuals. If we seek leadership, we must first learn humility and wisdom. If we want influence, we must first develop integrity and character. The process of transformation is rarely easy. It often involves seasons of waiting, trials that test our faith, and experiences that stretch us beyond our comfort. But if we resist this process, we risk stepping into blessings we are not yet ready to handle. So if you feel like you are in a season of struggle, remember this: you are not being denied, you are being developed. God is shaping you, refining you, and preparing you for something greater. The waiting is not wasted. The trials are not pointless. They are forming you into the person you need to be for what is ahead. One day when you look back, you will see that the transformation was necessary for the triumph. You will realize that the very things you once saw as delays were actually God's way of making you ready. And when you finally step into your blessing, you will carry it with wisdom, strength, and grace, because you have been prepared to receive it. We often grow restless in waiting. We pray, we strive, we look for signs, and when nothing seems to change, we wonder if God has forgotten us. But the truth is, God does not operate according to our impatience. He operates according to His perfect timing. What He has planned for you will come, but only when you are ready to receive it. Impatience is a natural response to waiting, yet rushing ahead of God's timing can be dangerous. A fruit picked before its time is bitter. A door forced open before it is meant to be unlocked can lead to places we are not prepared to handle. Sometimes what looks like a delay is actually divine protection. God knows when the conditions are right, when your heart is ready, and when the blessing will be most meaningful. Consider Sarah and Abraham. God promised them a son, yet years passed without fulfillment. In their impatience they took matters into their own hands, leading to the birth of Ishmael through Hagar. But this was not the child of promise. In time, Isaac was born, as God had originally intended. Their story reminds us that trying to force a blessing before its appointed time can lead to unnecessary struggle. God's plan will always come to pass, but it will come according to His wisdom, not our hurried desires. Look at Joseph's life. He had dreams of greatness as a young man, but those dreams were not fulfilled immediately. Instead, he went through betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment before he was elevated to a position of power. Had Joseph been promoted too soon, he would not have had the wisdom and humility required to lead. The years of waiting were not wasted. They were shaping him for his destiny. Even Jesus, though the Son of God, waited for the appointed time to begin his ministry. He did not rush ahead, though he was fully capable. He waited because timing matters. If Jesus himself understood the necessity of divine timing, how much more should we? So, what should we do while we wait? We should trust. We should prepare. We should allow God to refine us, knowing that when the time is right, nothing can stop what He has planned. Delays do not mean denial, they mean development. What God has spoken over your life will come to pass, but not a moment too soon and not a second too late. Therefore, do not despise the waiting season. It is not a punishment, it is preparation. When the appointed time arrives, the blessing will not feel rushed or forced. It will fit perfectly, like a key turning in a lock, opening doors that no one else could have opened. And in that moment, you will realize that God's timing was always best.